We obviously want all of the brilliant things these AI systems can do, come up with new cures for diseases, new energy sources, incredible things for humanity. That's the promise of AI. But also, there are worries if the AI systems are built with the wrong value systems, or they're built unsafely. That could be also very bad. Wired sat down with Demis Hassabis, who's the CEO of Google DeepMind, which is the engine of the company's artificial intelligence. He's a Nobel Prize winner and also a knight. We discussed AGI, the future of work, and how Google plans to compete in the age of AI. The central idea of this video is the profound duality of artificial general intelligence, AGI. Its immense potential to solve humanity's greatest challenges, such as disease and energy scarcity, contrasted with the immense risks of building it unsafely or with the wrong values. Google DeepMind CEO Demis Hassabis argues that AGI is on track to be developed within the next 5 to 10 years, and the primary challenge is not just technical, but also ensuring global cooperation and smart governance to manage its power responsibly and avoid catastrophic outcomes. And I think it was like a 20-year mission. We're like 15 years into it and you're on track. I feel like, yeah, we're pretty much dead on track, actually. Yeah. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, that would be my, maybe 50% chance that we'll have what we define as AGI. Yes. Well, some of your peers are saying 2 years, 3 years, and others say a little more. But that's really close. That's really soon. How do we know that we're that close? There's a bit of a debate going on at the moment in the field about definitions of AGI, and then, of course, dependent on that, there's different predictions for when it will happen. We've been pretty consistent from the very beginning, and actually Shane Legge, one of my co-founders and our chief scientist, he helped define the term AGI back in, I think, early, 2001 type of time frame. And we've always thought about it as, a system that has the ability to exhibit sort of all the cognitive capabilities we have as humans. And the reason that's important, the reference to the human mind, is the human mind is the only existence proof we have maybe in the universe. That general intelligence is possible. So if you want to claim sort of general intelligence AGI, then you need to show that it generalizes to all these domains. Is when everything's filled in, all the check marks are filled in, then when we have it, it's yes. So I think there are missing capabilities right now, that all of us who have used the latest sort of LLMs and chatbots will know very well, like on reasoning, on planning, on memory. I don't think today's systems can invent, true invention, true creativity, hypothesize new scientific theories. They're extremely useful. They're impressive, but they have holes. And actually, one of the main reasons I don't think we're at AGI yet is because of the consistency of responses. In some domains, we have systems that can do international maths, Olympiad math problems, to gold medal standard with our alpha proof system. But on the other hand, these systems sometimes still trip up on high school maths, or even counting the number of letters in a word. Yeah, so that to me is not what you would expect. That level of sort of difference in performance across the board is not consistent enough for, and therefore shows that these systems are not fully generalizing yet. But when we get it, is it then like a phase shift that, then all of a sudden things are different? All the check marks are checked. Yeah. And we have a thing that can do everything. Are we then power in a new world? I think that again, that is debated, and it's not clear to me whether it's going to be more of a kind of incremental transition, versus a step function. My guess is it looks like it's going to be more of an incremental shift. Even if you had a system like that, the physical world still operates at the end of with the physical laws, factories, robots, these other things. So it'll take a while for the effects of that, this sort of digital intelligence, if you like, to really impact, I think, a lot of the real world things. Maybe another, decade plus. But there's other theories on that too, where it could come faster. Yeah. Eric Schmidt, who I think used to work at Google, has said that it's almost like a binary thing. He says if China, for instance, gets AGI, then we're cooked. Because if someone gets it, like 10 minutes before, the next guy, then you can never catch up, because then it'll maintain bigger leads there. You don't buy that, I guess. I think it's an unknown. It's one of the many unknowns, which is that, that's sometimes called the hard takeoff scenario where, the idea there is that these AGI systems, they're able to self-improve, maybe code themselves, future versions themselves that maybe they're extremely fast at doing that. So what would be a slight lead? Let's say, a few days could suddenly become a chasm. If that was true. But there are many other ways it could go too where it's more incremental. Some of these self-improvement things are not able to kind of accelerate in that way. Then, being around the same time would not make much difference. But it's important. I mean, these issues on the geopolitical issues, I think the systems that are being built, they will have some imprint of the values and the kind of norms of the designers and the culture that they were embedded in. So, I think there it is important, these kinds of international questions. So when you build AI at Google, do you have that in mind? Do you feel, competitive imperative too, in case that's true? Oh my God, we better be. It's a very intense time at the moment in the field, as everyone knows. There's so many resources going into it, lots of pressures, lots of things to that need to be researched, and there's sort of lots of different types of pressures going on. We obviously want all of the brilliant things that these AI systems can do. I think eventually we'll be able to, advance medicine and science with it like we've done with AlphaFold, come up with new cures for diseases, new energy sources, incredible things for humanity. That's the promise of AI. But also there are worries both in terms of, if the AI systems are built with the wrong value systems, or they're built unsafely, that could be also very bad. And there are at least two risks that I worry a lot about. One is bad actors, and whether it's individuals or rogue nations repurposing general-purpose AI technology, for harmful ends. And then the one is, obviously, the technical risk of AI itself as it gets more and more powerful, more and more agentic. Can we make sure the guardrails are safe around it? They can't be circumvented. And that interacts with this idea of, what are the systems that are built by humanity going to be like? There's commercial imperative, there's national imperative, and there's a safety aspect to worry about, who's in the lead and where those projects are. A few years ago, the companies were saying, please regulate us. We need regulation. And now, in the US at least, the current administration seems less interested in putting regulations on AI than accelerating it so we can beat the Chinese. Are you still asking for regulation? Do you think that that's a miss on our part? I think, and I've been consistent in this. I think there are all these, other geopolitical sort of overlays that have to be taken into account, and the world's a very different place to, how it was 5 years ago in many dimensions. But there's also, I think the idea of smart regulation that makes sense around these increasingly powerful systems, I think, is going to be important. I continue to believe that. I think, though, and I've been sitting on this as well, it sort of needs to be international, which looks hard at the moment in the way the world is working because these systems, they're going to affect everyone, and they're digital systems. Yeah, so, if you sort of restrict it in one area, that doesn't really help in terms of the overall safety of these systems getting built, for the world, and as a society. So that's the bigger problem, I think, is some kind of international cooperation or collaboration, I think, is what's required. And then smart regulation, nimble regulation that moves as the knowledge about the research, becomes, better and better. Would it ever reach a point for you where you would feel, man, we're not putting the guardrails in. You know, we're competing that we really have to stop, or you can't get involved in that. I think a lot of the leaders of the main labs, at least the Western labs, you know, there's a small number of them, and we do all know each other and talk to each other regularly, and a lot of the lead researchers do. The problem is that it's not clear we have the right definitions to agree when that point is. Like today's systems, although they're impressive as we discussed earlier, they're also very flawed. And I don't think today's systems are posing any sort of existential risk. But, so it's still theoretical, but the problem is there are a lot of unknowns. We don't know how fast those will come, and we don't know how risky they will be. But in my view, when there are so many unknowns, then I'm optimistic we'll overcome them. At least technically. I think the geopolitical questions could actually end up being trickier, given enough time and enough care and thoughtfulness, sort of using the scientific method as we, approach this AGI point. That makes perfect sense. But on the other hand, if that time frame is there, we just don't have much time. No, we don't. We don't have much time. I mean, we're increasingly putting resources into security and, things like cyber, and also research into controllability and understanding of these systems, sometimes called mechanistic interpretability. There's a lot of different sub-branches of AI, yeah. That's why I want to get to interpret. Yeah, they are being invested in, and I think even more needs to happen. And then at the same time, we need to also have, societal debates more about institutional building. How do we want governance to work? How we're going to get international agreement, at least on some basic principles around how these systems are used and deployed and also built. What about the effect on work, on the marketplace? Yeah. How much do you feel that AI is going to change? People's jobs. The way jobs are distributed in the workforce. I don't think we've seen my views. If you talk to economists, they feel like there's not much has changed yet. People are finding these tools useful, certainly in certain domains like, things like AlphaFold. Many scientists are using it to accelerate their work. So it seems to be additive at the moment. We'll see what happens over the next 5-10 years. I think there's going to be a lot of change with the jobs world, but I think as in the past, what generally tends to happen is new jobs are created that are actually better, that utilize these tools or new technologies. What happened with the internet? What happened with mobile? We'll see if it's different this time. Yeah, obviously, everyone always thinks this new one will be different, and maybe it will be. But I think for the next few years, it's most likely to be, we'll have these incredible tools that supercharge our productivity, make us, really useful for creative tools and actually almost make us a little bit superhuman in some ways, in what we're able to produce, individually. So I think there's going to be a kind of golden era of the next period of what we're able to do. Well, if AGI can do everything humans can do, then it would seem that they could do the new jobs too. That's the next question about what AGI brings. But even if you have those capabilities, there's a lot of things I think we won't want to do, with a machine. I sometimes give this example of doctors and nurses. Maybe a doctor and what the doctor does and the diagnosis, one could imagine that being helped by an AI tool or even having an AI kind of doctor. On the other hand, like nursing, I don't think you'd want a robot to do that. I think there's something about the human empathy aspect of that and the care and so on that's particularly humanistic. I think there's lots of examples like that but it's going to be, a different world for sure. If you would talk to a graduate now, what advice would you give to keep working? Yeah, for the course of a lifetime. Yeah, in the age of AGI. My view is currently, and of course this is changing all the time with the technology developing, but right now, if you think of the next 5-10 years as being, The most productive people might be 10x more productive if they are native with these tools. So I think kids today, students today, my encouragement would be immerse yourself in these new systems, understand them. So still, I think it's still important to study STEM and programming and other things so that you understand how they're built. Maybe you can modify them yourself on top of the models that are available. There's lots of great open source models and so on. And then become, incredible at things like fine-tuning, system prompting, system instructions, all of these additional things that anyone can do and really know how to get the most out of those tools and do it for your research work, programming, things that you're doing on your course, and then come out of that being incredible at utilizing and those new tools for whatever it is you're going to do. Let's look a little beyond the 5 and 10-year range. Tell me what you envision when you look at it if your future in 20 years, in 30 years, if this comes about. What's the world like? When AGI is everywhere? Well, if everything goes well, then we should be in an era of what I like to call sort of radical abundance. So, AGI solves some of these key, what I sometimes call root node problems in the world-facing society. So a good one, examples will be curing diseases, much healthier, longer lifespans, finding new energy sources, whether that's optimal batteries and better, suit room temperature superconductors, fusion. And then if that all happens, then, it should be a kind of era of maximum human flourishing where we travel to the stars, and colonize the galaxy. That's, I think the beginning of that will happen in the next 20, 30 years if the next period goes well. I'm a little skeptical of that. I think we have an unbelievable abundance now, but we don't distribute it, fairly. I think that we kind of know how to fix climate change, right? We don't need AGI to tell us how to do it, yet we're not doing it. I agree with that. I think we've been, as a species, as a society, not good at collaborating. And I think climate is a good example. But I think we're still operating. Humans are still operating in a zero-sum game mentality because actually, the Earth is quite finite relative to the amount of people there are now and our cities. And, this is why our natural habitats are being destroyed and it's infecting, wildlife and the climate and everything. And it's also partly because people are not willing to accept. We do not have to figure out climate, but it would require people to make sacrifices. Yeah, and people don't want to, but this radical abundance would be different. We would be in a finally, it would feel like a non-zero-sum game. How will we get Jordan into that? Like you talk about disease? I'll give you an example. We have vaccines and now people are, some people think we shouldn't use it. Let me give you a very simple example. Sure, water access. This is going to be a huge issue in the next 10, 20. It's already an issue. Countries and difference, poorer parts of the world, drier parts of the world, also obviously compounded by climate change. Yeah, we have a solution to water access. It's desalination. It's easy. There's plenty of seawater. Almost all countries have a coastline, but the problem is it's salty water. But desalination, only very rich countries, some countries do that, use desalination as a solution to their freshwater problem, but it costs a lot of energy. But if energy was essentially zero, there was renewable, free, clean energy, right? Like fusion. Suddenly, you solve the water access problem. Water is who controls the river, or what you do with that does not becomes, much less important than it is today. I think things like water access, if you run forward 20 years and there isn't a solution like that, could lead to all sorts of conflicts probably. That's the trend the way it's trending, especially if you include further climate change. And there's many examples like that. You could create rocket fuel easily, because you could just separate that from seawater, hydrogen, and oxygen. It's just energy again. So you feel that these problems get solved by AGI, by AI, then we're going to our outlook will change, and we will be, that's what I hope, avariciously. That's what I hope, but that's still a secondary part. So the AGI will give us the radical abundance capability technically, like the water access. I then hope, and this is where I think we need some great philosophers or social scientists to be involved, that should hopefully shift our mindset as a society to non-zero sum. You know, there's still the issue of right. Do you divide even the radical abundance fairly, right? Of course, that's what should happen, but I think there's much more likely once people start feeling and understanding that there is this almost limitless supply of raw materials and energy and things like that. Do you think that, driving this innovation by profit-making companies is the right way to go? We're most likely to reach that optimistic high point through that. I think it's the current, capitalism or, is the current or the Western sort of democratic kind of, systems have so far been proven to be sort of the best drivers of progress. So I think that's true. My view is that once you get to that sort of stage of radical abundance and post-AGI, I think economics starts changing even the notion of value and money. And so, again, I think I'm not sure why economists are not working harder on this if maybe they don't believe it's that close, right? But if they really did, that like the AGI scientists do, then I think there's a lot of new economic theory that's required. One final thing. I actually agree with you that this is so significant and is going to have a huge impact, but when I write about it, I always get a lot of response from people who are really angry already about artificial intelligence and what's happening. Have you tasted that? Have you gotten that pushback and anger by a lot of people? It's almost like the Industrial Revolution people. Yeah. I mean, I think that anytime I haven't personally seen a lot of that, but obviously I've read and heard a lot about it. It's very understandable. That's all that's happened many times. You say Industrial Revolution when there's big change, a big revolution, and I think this will be at least as big as the Industrial Revolution, probably a lot bigger. That's surprising. There's unknowns. It's scary. Things will change. But on the other hand, when I talk to people about the passion of why I'm building AI, which is to advance science and medicine and understanding of the world around us, and then I explain to people, and I've demonstrated it's not just talk. Here's AlphaFold, Nobel Prize-winning breakthrough can help with medicine and drug discovery. Obviously, we're doing this with isomorphic now to extend it into drug discovery, and we can cure diseases, terrible diseases that might be afflicting your family. Suddenly people are like, well, that's of course, we need that. It would be immoral not to have that if that's within our grasp. And the same with climate and energy, yeah. Many of the big societal problems, it's not like we're, that we know. We've talked about there's many big challenges facing society today, and I often say I would be very worried about our future if I didn't know something as revolutionary as AI was coming down the line to help with those other challenges. Of course, it's also a challenge itself, right? But at least it's one of these challenges that can actually help with the others if we get it right.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into something that feels incredibly timely and, significant right now. Artificial general intelligence, AGI, and what its potential arrival could mean for, all of us.
Exactly. And our map for this deep dive comes from excerpts of a recent interview with Demis Hassabis. He's the CEO of Google DeepMind. The interview was on a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And, he's described as a Nobel Prize winner, a knight.
Yeah.
Basically leading one of the absolute powerhouses in AI.
Right. A major voice. So our mission here is to really dig into his perspective. Like, what's his actual definition of AGI? How close does he think we really are? And what are the big risks he's, grappling with? And maybe most importantly, what's the incredible upside he thinks is possible if we manage this right?
Yeah, it's the topic that immediately shows this kind of split, doesn't it? On one side, you've got this huge potential for revolutionary good, curing diseases, breakthroughs in science, new energy. But right alongside that, you have these serious worries about safety, misuse, massive societal disruption. We're going to try and look at both sides, through the lens of what he said.
All right, let's start at the beginning then. AGI, how does Hassabis define what that actually is?
His definition is quite specific. AGI is the system that exhibits all the cognitive capabilities that humans have.
All of them. That sounds like a really high bar. Why use humans as the benchmark?
Well, as he explains it, the human mind is really the only existence proof we have right now. It's the one example we know of anywhere that shows general intelligence is even possible. So if you're going to claim general intelligence, it needs to cover that whole spectrum of human ability to really earn the name.
Okay, that makes sense. It's the only model we've got. Now, the big question, right, how soon? What's his actual estimate for reaching this AGI?
He puts the probability at 50% for reaching their definition of AGI within the next 5 to 10 years. And he even says DeepMind is pretty much dead on track for the original 20-year mission they set out on, which they're about 15 years into now.
Wow. 5 to 10 years. That feels incredibly near, doesn't it?
It really does. And he notes, some peers in the field predict it even sooner, maybe 2 to 3 years, while others think maybe a bit longer. But yeah, even in this conversation, 5 to 10 years is consistently talked about as really close, really soon.
Yeah.
You really feel that sense of acceleration.
So, okay, if that's AGI, where does that leave the really impressive AI we see today? The big language models, the chatbots everyone's using. Hassabis is clear they are not AGI yet.
Correct. He points out the capabilities they still lack, or at least they lack consistently. Things like true reasoning, long-term planning, reliable memory, genuine invention, real creativity, or the ability to just spontaneously come up with entirely new scientific theories.
And he uses a really striking example to kind of underline this missing piece, this idea of inconsistency.
He does. It's pretty telling. He mentions their alpha-proof system. It can solve problems at the International Math Olympiad level, like gold medal standard stuff. Incredibly complex. But then these same systems can sometimes, completely trip up on seemingly simple things like basic high school math or even just counting letters in a word.
That difference is just wild. Olympic level math, 1 minute, failing basic, counting the next.
Exactly. And for Hassabis, that kind of performance gap, brilliant in specific complex areas, but fragile in more general, seemingly easier ones. That's the clearest sign that these systems are just not fully generalizing yet.
Yeah.
They haven't hit that broad, robust capability that defines AGI.
Okay, that makes sense. Which brings us to another big question, another unknown in the field. How will AGI actually show up? Is it going to be a smooth, gradual thing or more like a sudden jump, a step function?
He frames it as, a debated question.
Mm-hmm.
But his personal guess, based on what he's seeing, is that it looks more likely to be an incremental shift, not a sudden hard takeoff.
And why does he lean towards gradual?
His reasoning is that even if you get super advanced digital intelligence really fast, the physical world kind of puts the brakes on things. Building factories, deploying robots, changing infrastructure, that all takes time. So the effects of this digital leap will take time to really spread out and manifest in the physical world.
But there is that other view, the hard takeoff scenario. It sounds a bit more dramatic.
It does, yeah. And he mentions Eric Schmidt has talked about this worry. The basic idea is if one group, a company, a nation, whatever, gets AGI even a tiny bit earlier than others, like days or maybe even minutes, they could potentially get this massive advantage that nobody else can overcome.
How would such a small lead turn into something so huge?
Well, in that scenario, the idea is the AGI could potentially improve itself really, really fast, like understand its own code, rewrite it, optimize itself, and just accelerate its own capabilities exponentially. So what starts as a tiny lead could, according to this view, just blow up into an unbridgeable chasm.
That sounds pretty sci-fi, but he presents it as a real concern some people have.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He includes it as one of the big unknowns the field is wrestling with. Whether that kind of recursive self-improvement actually happens in that specific explosive way is still a question mark, but it's definitely a scenario that raises serious strategic concerns.
Right. Speaking of concerns, let's shift to the potential downsides. What are the risks and worries that, keep him up at night when thinking about this kind of powerful AI and eventually AGI?
He's pretty direct about it. There are significant worries. He says flat out that if these first powerful systems are built with the wrong value systems or aren't built safely enough, the outcome could be very bad.
Okay. And does he point to specific types of risk?
Yeah, Two main categories he focuses on. First is the risk from bad actors. This is the worry that individuals or rogue states could take this very general technology and deliberately use it for harmful things, basically weaponizing a revolutionary tool.
That seems pretty intuitive, yeah. Powerful tool, potential for misuse. What's the second big risk he mentions?
The second is more of a technical risk, inherent in the AI system itself. As AI gets more powerful, and he uses the term agentic, meaning it can pursue goals and act more independently, the question becomes, can we be totally sure the guardrails, the controls we build in, are actually robust? And crucially, can we be sure the AI, as it gets smarter, can't find ways around them or override them?
And those risks seem really tied into that earlier point about who gets there first and the whole geopolitical race thing.
Absolutely. The nature of the first AGIs, who builds them, how safely they're designed, how they're rolled out, all that is critical when you think about these potential dangers.
Which naturally leads us to regulation, governance. What's Hassabis' take on the role regulation needs to play here?
Well, he notes an interesting kind of shift in the vibe, especially in the U.S. A few years back, it seemed like the AI industry itself was asking for some regulation. But now, he observes, the focus from the current U.S. administration seems maybe less on regulation and more on just accelerating development, partly framed as, a competition, needing to beat the Chinese.
So, despite that shift, does he personally still think regulation is important?
He seems consistent on this. He maintains his view that smart, nimble regulation is going to be really important for these increasingly powerful systems.
And what's the biggest challenge to making regulation work effectively?
The main hurdle, he thinks, is that regulation really needs to be international. He admits that looks incredibly hard right now, given global politics. But he stresses why it's so vital. These are digital systems. They don't respect borders. If one country restricts things but others don't, you don't get overall global safety. You need international cooperation for it to really work.
Yeah, that adds a whole layer of complexity, doesn't it? And he also mentioned how difficult it is to even know when you might need to regulate or maybe even pause things.
Yes, exactly. He points out that leaders from the big Western AI labs do talk regularly, which is good, but they don't really have the right definitions yet, like shared standards or metrics to agree on exactly when a system might cross a threshold and become a potential existential risk. He says today's systems, while impressive, are still very flawed. They're not seen as that kind of risk today.
So the current state isn't the worry, it's more the uncertainty about how fast things could change and how big the risks might become.
Precisely. It's the unknowns. How quickly will they evolve and just how risky will they get?
Okay, so given these risks and the urgency he mentioned, we don't have much time, what's actually being done now to try and manage these challenges?
Well, he says a significant amount of resources are going into things like security, cyber defenses, and also fundamental research into controllability. How do we make these systems do what we intend? And also into mechanistic interpretability, trying to really understand how these black boxes, these neural networks, are actually making decisions.
Does he think that's enough? What's being done on those fronts?
No, he indicates that even more needs to happen there, on the technical safety and understanding side.
And it's not just about the tech itself, right? He talks about needing broader societal action, too.
Crucially, yeah. Beyond the technical work in the labs, he's calling for much wider societal debate. We need to build new institutions or adapt the ones we have to figure out governance. And a huge push is needed to get international agreement on just basic principles for how we build, deploy, and use these incredibly powerful systems. It's a massive multi-part challenge.
Let's pivot now to something that touches everyone directly. Jobs, the economy. What's the current picture look like, and what does he see coming?
Right now, his read, based on talking to economists, is that not much has changed yet in terms of big shifts in the job market. Current AI tools are mostly seen as additive. He uses AlphaFold again as an example. Scientists use it to speed up their research. It makes them better at their jobs, more productive. It's not replacing them yet.
Additive for now, but looking ahead, say 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, he predicts the next 5 to 10 years are going to be a lot of change with the jobs world.
Does that mean widespread unemployment? What's his feeling?
He kind of leans on history here. With past tech revolutions, think the internet or mobile phones, totally new jobs, often better paying ones, were created that used the new tools. He does acknowledge, this time could be different. Everyone always thinks the current revolution is unique, but the historical pattern is generally job transformation and creation, not just destruction.
Okay, and what about the near term, like the next few years for individuals using these tools?
He actually describes it as a potential golden era. He thinks these tools could supercharge our productivity, make us incredibly good at creative, complex tasks, and almost make us a little bit superhuman as individuals. He throws out the idea that someone who gets really good, really native with these tools, could maybe see a 10x increase in their personal productivity.
Wow, 10x productivity. That's staggering. But then the logical follow-up, if AGI can eventually do everything humans can, couldn't it also do these super productive creative jobs too?
That's the big question, isn't it? He does add a nuance, though. He suggests there might be some things, some roles, that even if a machine could technically do them, we as humans might just not want them to.
Like what? Can you give an example?
He uses nursing. He says, while AI might become amazing for doctors with diagnosis or treatment plans, that core human element in nursing, the empathy, the care, the connection, he sees that as fundamentally humanistic. Something he believes we probably wouldn't or shouldn't want to hand over to a machine, even if it could technically do the tasks.
Interesting distinction. So thinking about young people just starting out now, graduates maybe, who are going to live their whole careers in this AI world, what specific advice does Hassabis give them?
Yeah, building on that 10x productivity idea for people who really get these tools, his main advice is pretty clear. Immerse yourself in these new systems. Really make it a priority to understand them.
Does he mean just knowing how to use the apps or something deeper?
Both, really. He still stresses the importance of traditional STEM skills programming. That foundation helps you understand how they're built, maybe work on them, modify them, contribute to open source.
So understand the guts and become a power user.
Exactly. And on the user side, he says, become incredible at utilizing them. Learn advanced prompting, fine-tuning models for what you need, using system instructions well. Basically, learn all the tricks to squeeze the absolute maximum value out of these AI tools for whatever you do, whether it's research, writing, coding, art, whatever.
Okay, let's zoom out now. Beyond the next 5 or 10 years, look at the longer-term vision Hassabis paints maybe 20 or 30 years from now. If we get the near term right, what's the optimistic future he sees?
He talks about reaching an era of what he calls radical abundance.
Radical abundance. Wow,
Yeah.
that sounds transformative. What does that actually look like in practice?
It basically means AGI helping us solve the really fundamental, persistent problems that have plagued humanity for ages. The root node problems, he calls them.
Okay, what are some key examples he gives of these root node problems?
The really big ones are things like curing all diseases, leading to much healthier, longer lives, and finding totally new, abundant energy sources. He mentions things like optimizing batteries, discovering room temperature superconductors, or, the big one, achieving practical fusion energy.
Fusion energy always sounds like the holy grail. Why is that such a game changer in this abundance picture?
Well, fusion is basically making energy like the sun does, right? Fusing atoms. If we could crack clean, practical fusion, it would mean almost limitless energy without the downsides of current nuclear power. It just fundamentally changes the energy equation for the planet.
And how does that super abundant energy then help solve other specific problems? He used water as an example, didn't he?
Yeah, it's a great illustration. Clean water access is a huge global issue, getting worse with climate change, potential source of conflict. We know how to desalinate seawater, technically, but it takes a ton of energy. So if AGI helps deliver free, clean energy like fusion, the energy cost of desalination basically drops to zero. You can make fresh water from the ocean anywhere coastal. That solves a massive potential conflict driver. He even threw in that you could easily make rocket fuel from seawater with that kind of cheap energy.
So incredible technical solutions flowing from this abundance. What's the ultimate dream then, if this vision plays out?
He sees it leading to an era of maximum human flourishing. And the really long-term aspiration, the start of which he thinks could happen in 20, 30 years if things go well, is travel to the stars, colonizing the galaxy.
That is quite a vision. Breathtaking. But he's also realistic, isn't he? He knows there are challenges to getting there, especially around, well, human nature and how our societies work.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
He brings up the point that even with all the wealth and technical know-how we have today, we're still terrible at distributing things fairly. He connects it back to climate change. We mostly know what to do technically, but actually doing it requires tough changes, sacrifices. And humans tend to operate with this zero-sum game mentality, right? Where my win has to be your loss.
So how might radical abundance change that zero-sum thinking? Is that the hope?
That seems to be the hope, yeah. If AGI genuinely provides seemingly limitless resources, clean energy, maybe materials synthesized from basic elements, cures for diseases, maybe, just maybe, it would finally feel like a non-zero-sum game. If those fundamental resource constraints are lifted, maybe the whole incentive structure shifts away from just competing over scarce stuff.
But even if there's enough for everyone, the question of how to share it fairly still feels like a huge hurdle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he acknowledges that's where the problem stops being purely technical. He feels like even if AGI gives us the capability for abundance, we're going to desperately need help from other fields like philosophy, social sciences, to help navigate that necessary mindset shift and figure out fair ways to distribute things in a world where traditional ideas of value might completely change.
And he mentioned economics needing to change too, right?
Yes, he notes that capitalism has been amazing at driving progress so far.
Yeah.
But in a post-AGI world of radical abundance, where basic needs might be easily met and the whole concept of value or money could shift, he thinks we'll need entirely new economic theory. He even sounded a bit surprised that economists aren't working harder on this already, maybe suggesting they don't quite believe AGI is as close as the AI folks do.
Right. Finally, he touches on the public reaction. The pushback, anger, fear some people feel about AI. He compares it to the Industrial Revolution, says AI could be even bigger, and that those reactions are understandable.
He does acknowledge that, but he counters it pretty powerfully by coming back to his core motivation, his passion, which is building AI to really advance science, medicine, our basic understanding of the world.
And he's got that killer example again, AlphaFold.
Exactly. He holds up AlphaFold as Exhibit A, a Nobel Prize-winning breakthrough, already showing real promise in helping drug discovery, medical research, through their other company, Isomorphic Labs.
Yeah, framing it around curing terrible diseases feels like a very potent counter to the fear.
It really is. He says when he talks about potentially curing diseases, things that might affect people listening, their own families, friends, the reaction is often, well, of course we need that. He suggests that achieving things like that, if it's within reach, creates almost a moral imperative to actually pursue the technology responsibly.
And it's not just medicine, right? It's those other massive global problems, too.
Exactly. Same logic applies to climate change, energy.
Right.
AI, despite being a challenge itself, is also maybe the most powerful tool we've ever conceived to help solve these other huge existential threats humanity faces. He even says he'd be much more worried about the future if he didn't see something like AI coming along to potentially help tackle these things.
So AI is a challenge, yes, but maybe also a key to unlocking solutions for other huge challenges, provided, as he keeps saying, we get it right.
And that phrase, getting it right, that really seems to be the core tension running through everything he talked about.
It absolutely does. We've heard Hassabis' view on the incredible speed, that potential AGI timeline, but also just how many unknowns there are, how it arrives, the technical risks, the societal ones, the massive challenge of global cooperation and regulation, the disruption to work.
All of that weighed against this truly massive vision of solving fundamental problems, maybe bringing about this era of radical abundance, maximum human flourishing.
It leaves you with so much to think about, considering the potential for radical abundance, but also, our human track record with fairness, distribution, that zero-sum thinking, and the fact that we'll need totally new economic and social ideas. What fundamental changes in us, in our human mindset and systems, do you think are actually needed to make that optimistic future happen?
Yeah, what stands out most to you from this deep dive?